couple of things there. One is I think that somebody needs to bring out a generative AI platform called Ad Nauseam. I think that'd be perfect.
Yeah.
And then the other one is at the beginning of the Hello and welcome to episode 232 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. It's Saturday the 31st of August. I hope you've had a great week, and for my American chums, you're enjoying the holiday weekend. I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm not a rockstar, but I am a CMO and trusted advisor, and on this show, with the help of my chums, we share marketing street knowledge that I hope will bring out the rockstar marketer in you. Come say hello. You can find us at rockstarcmo.com or rockstarcmo on LinkedIn. This week, Jeff is back in the studio and we step through the first 5 steps of creating an ideal customer profile, or ICP, using an example of a consulting business. And in the bar, Robert shares a fantastic cocktail as we discuss signal and noise. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back.
We'll be right back. My dad works in B2B marketing, but I never really knew what that meant. Then one day, my dad came by my school for career day and told everyone in my class he was a big ROAS man. Then he just kept saying things like, the bigger the ROAS, the better, over and over. My friends still laugh at me to this day. I think it means calculating a return on ad spend. One thing's for sure, I'll be known as the ROAS man's kid for the rest of my days. Why couldn't you just be a fireman or a lawyer? Why? You ruined my life, Dad.
Not everyone gets B2B, but LinkedIn has the people who do. And with ads on LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people based on job title, industry, likelihood to buy, and more. Start converting your B2B audience into high-quality leads today. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
Let's get started with Jeff Clark, our in-house strategist and former Forrester research director.
Hello, Ian. Good afternoon or good evening, since you're 5 hours ahead of me. So good to see you again back in the Rockstar CMO studio.
Thank you, mate. And I'm actually in. I know that as far as the listener is concerned, I am in our Rockstar CMO studio, and I'm actually in one of these little telephone boxes in a WeWork.
Yeah. Well, we work from wherever we are, so there you go.
So the view is not quite the same. I know that we don't share videos, so nobody can see. So I think that's cool. So how are you, mate? You had a week off? You went to Maine? How are you?
I had a week off, and we're on the lovely coast of Maine, and it's, we had a great time. Summer is certainly winding down. It was cooler in general, and certainly cooler than here in our Happy Valley. Spending a lot of time on the water, paddling around in a kayak.
Oh, nice. We're coming up to the holiday that buttons the end of summer for you guys soon, aren't we? And that's always
the Labor Day, the demarcation of kids going back to school and people getting serious about work again. Not that they weren't serious before, but the vacations are off. Get back to the grindstone.
All right. So talking about back to the grindstone. So this episode, I'm really excited about this conversation, actually. Maybe really excited. I was thinking about this, like everybody on LinkedIn is thrilled about something, right? So maybe I should be thrilled about this conversation.
You're tickled pink.
I'm tickled pink. I'm quite interested in I don't know how this is going to go, and I like how what we're going to do. So we've talked a lot, a couple of times about creating an ideal customer profile. In this episode, we're actually going to create one. And of course, we have 5 acting steps. We talked about that in episode 172. And also, there's a blog post, which I'll include in the show notes, that you wrote, Jess, which takes somebody through a scorecard of their ICP. So we've covered ICP a couple of times. But what we're going to do now is we're going to use a fictional company. But we said it was fictional, but it might not be that fictional.
Might not be.
Yeah. And we're going to try and do a day, I don't know, how long would you normally spend on an ICP workshop? A day, a couple of days?
Oh, yeah.
Try and do that in 45 minutes.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you got to let me have my line. What say you, Jeff?
Yes. So the idea here is to create a advisory service for, an ICP for an advisory service that would serve clean tech companies, which is a fast-growing market, both here and in the UK and rest of Europe, et cetera, and in the Pacific, et cetera. It's kind of the rage these days. And of course, advisory service could mean anything from you just connect with a company and do some regular coaching, short-term consulting projects. You may get sucked into a interim CMO or a leadership position. And as we were kind of talking before we hit the record button, I mean, it's kind of, since I had left Forrester and Serious Decisions, it's like I've basically been doing this kind of work for tech companies, small managed service providers and stuff like that. So it's just kind of like refocusing, what I could do into a different market.
Yes. So we could be talking about somebody real that might be on this.
We could be podcast. Yeah, if you're listening, my phone number is. No, I won't give my phone number out.
555. No, well, actually, people can contact you through the contact us page of Rockstar CMO. Or
that's exactly right.
Hello at rockstarcmo.com. That's the one. So you mentioned there. So I think this is weird because we'll probably both take the same role. So you're the client and the advisor in this conversation. So you're going to have to help me out. So the first step, as we've defined in ICP, and when I say we, very much the experience that you have, is that we need to understand target industry, category, or sector. Where do your potential customers operate? What's the size of that market? Is it growing? Is it impacted by the factors that are unique to that industry, such as regulation and compliance? So, very much, as you know, I'm in a kind of nearby industry with one of my clients in terms of EV. So I think regulation and compliance is an important thing there. And I think what's interesting there, if I'm going to be the person doing the
running the
workshop in 45 minutes, is you mentioned they're clean tech companies. And this is quite a broad category, which is often a challenge that we find when we work with companies. They want to go broad and afraid to focus. What would you suggest there? What are you going to go for?
I agree. It is I guess part of my interest in clean tech is one I've been doing some work on from a kind of a policy advocacy side on climate change, et cetera. And so it's like, hey, how can I marry things that I do from a private consulting perspective with what I've been doing with from a sort of public advocacy perspective. And then when you look at clean tech, it's like, well, gosh, there's different companies that are in very different markets. I mean, you've got everything from, like renewable power generation to consumer products, like up to the EVs and the charging infrastructure for homes, or different new types of HVAC systems, agricultural, systems, recycling. I mean, it's just way too broad. And so you're looking at the types of companies that are entering larger markets that are like challengers with new types of offering, and each of those markets has their own dynamics. So it is best to pick one, land, and then if you get experience in that, then maybe you can see if you can move on to another. And in my particular case, since a lot of the work I've been doing has been tracking the transportation sector, again from a policy perspective, I kind of understand the maturity of the market in different countries, in terms of electrifying transportation. So EVs, but also getting into, mass transit options and things like that. So, and again, you got to look at this market and say, well, this can be pretty big, because you see transportation, that's a gigantic market, which includes a lot of big companies. So again, we're going to have to, which probably gets to one of our next steps, is to figure out how to narrow that even down a little bit further. But at least from a market perspective, you're working in a market where you kind of understand the dynamics of that market.
Right. So to play the role of somebody running this workshop, so what we've defined here is you're going to go for the clean tech industry, and you're going specifically for transportation, and we're going to find a niche within that. So we're doing all the right things here. We're niching down, right? It's specifically which category within the industry that you're going after. What I also like here is what you were talking about there is to probably niche further than you need to be, so you can build some trust and then grow out of it. I think is what you're suggesting there as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen that experience. I've seen that actually I've seen that in my own work, and I've seen that with various consultants that I work with. Once you become trusted, people then ask you to do things that maybe you weren't originally planning to do, but you're trusted. So they want you to do those things, right? So I think that's very true.
Becomes an opportunity to learn.
Absolutely. So we're moving on now. So we now, one of the things that I think we were talking about before I hit record was, do we need to worry about who their ICP is? So who they're serving? Do you think that's a useful exercise in moving forward? And is that something that you've done here?
Well, certainly, yes, you do. And I think from a couple of perspectives, one is just understanding the part of the pressures and the situation within the market. And so as we were saying earlier, like if you're a clean tech company, broadly speaking, but you're in transportation and you're typically in the area of trying to electrify transportation. So the charging infrastructure, the analysis behind that, the networks, the software. I mean, there's so many different things there.
Yeah.
And then who are they selling that to? And is that, are we focused on companies that are selling to other, businesses? So it's a B2B company. Are we focused on companies that may be, focusing on the consumer? Are we focusing on companies that are B2B to B2C? So ultimately, if you're working with somebody who's trying to service a charging infrastructure that is in part of in retail operations, then it becomes B2B, B2C. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that, when I first got started in the working world, I was working in a nonprofit organization that was helping solar companies, advocating, for the use of solar energy.
Yeah.
And then like decades later, I thought, I could crack back into that perhaps. And every time I thought about cracking back into that, it was like, well, everybody in this market is serving customers. So it's B2C. And I'm like, oh, geez, that's not really something I have experience in, at least for decades. And so, matching yourself and your skills to the customers you're going to serve. But the other aspect of understanding their ICP is that ultimately you're going to want to help build the ICP for them, right? That's one of the services you can provide is who's the customer, what are their needs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get focused. And this is the place to start in getting focused.
Oh, and also I think that's also a rabbit hole that we probably should go down at some other point, is defining not only who your target market is, but what is your offer to that target market. And as you discover your target market better, helping yourself to evolve that offer so that it fits that market. But anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
In workshops, you remember the workshops you often have a parking lot? We should have a rabbit hole list.
Yeah, you and me with our rabbit holes. That's absolutely true. So step 2. So the first step, as we discussed, is like that broader sort of industry that we're going for. So step 2, we know what industry we want to target. So now we want to get to what you fancy folks call the firmographics. So this is like the company size and revenue, right? Which is, I think, personally, as from a marketing perspective, is code for whether they can afford your product or not, right? And it's part of something you're going to use in sales qualification. But it's also, I think now we're getting to the level that these are going to be attributes that a marketing team or you doing your own marketing, you're going to be able to find these folks based on these attributes, right? So that's the next step, right? So where are you on that?
Yeah. So I think that, definitely you want to understand size and maturity.
Yeah.
They're not always necessarily, tightly related, but yes, typically, I actually say typically, but it's like in my case, in clean tech transportation, and definitely looking at startups and or small companies, maybe no revenue up to, $10 million of revenue, who are trying to establish a foothold in the market. And the service would likely be to help form the marketing function, much as what I was doing for managed service providers, or have been doing for managed service providers. So, it could act in a fractional CMO role, could be coordinating campaign activity, so, or maybe there's a small staff, maybe there's no staff, maybe they've worked with an agency. But, you want to rule out the big car companies. They probably have too many marketers and too many marketing dollars, and not going to go there anyway. It also does mean you may have to provide some help gratis before they get the budget.
Right.
Right. I think I mentioned in passing, I went and worked for an incubator project that was in the state of Vermont, just up the road from us. And, and I was talking about, how can I help these companies that I was actually reviewing in the sort of the selection process to be included in the incubator project. And, the people who were running this were very frank. It's like, sometimes you may have to provide gratis service, which I actually did for one company for about a year. And it didn't pan out into anything. So, that's the way it goes.
I'm writing this on our rabbit hole list, because I think if we were to do an episode that actually helps advisors and consultants, I think one of those challenges is how much you give away for free. And I think one of those challenges is, can I just pick your brains for a moment? And it's like, sure, for a moment. First 15 minutes are free.
Yeah, it's $200 an hour after that.
Yeah, and that's always the tricky thing, isn't it? It's where you. But anyway, again, I've parked that on our rabbit hole list in our virtual conference room in which we're doing this. We're doing this workshop. Okay, so we're moving on to step number 3. So we've decided on the category and the industry we're going for. We're getting a profile of the company that we're after, and we're honing in on that profile. So next, we need to think about what are their business goals and needs, which is one of our absolute favorite topics on Rockstar CMO, right?
Absolutely.
About that. So this isn't about specific problems and that are going to be fixed by features and functions. I know that, Jeff, you don't have features and functions because you're not a software product. but what
I do function though, so.
But in this case, in this not so fictional case, what is driving this business and the industry factors that might influence the business decision to buy and to need this service? So, and the other thing is just a quick one as well, is just as a continuation from some of the things we've been talking about the last few weeks before you were off, was we were talking about this STARS model, weren't we? About start, turnaround, and I've
accelerating growth, turnaround. I always think of reboot, but it's revitalization and sustained growth. That's the final S.
Yeah. So, and I'll include a link to that. So, so that's also part of business goals and needs. So where are we on this with your? I'm demonstrating a lack of qualification to do workshops at this point. That no 45 minutes. So where are you on this?
It could be that you're not in the studio and you're just like, But anyway, so I think bringing up the STAR model is important here, because I think there's 2 important distinctions in terms of like looking at business goals and needs. And one is from the STAR model is, the companies may need help with their strategy. Are they trying to grow organically? Are they trying to land a small number of big companies in that organic growth? Or are they, trying to scale? Do they want to eventually sell the business? Have they had fits and starts? I mean, it's a lot of small companies, they get going, they hit a roadblock, maybe they lose funding, no, they get more funding back. So are we now in a turnaround or a revitalization perspective? Chances are they're not in the sustaining growth mode. They're well far away from there. And then the other thing is which we touched on a little bit earlier, is from a needs perspective, is helping the company define their customer needs in terms of building a framework on how are they going to market and run campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. So who are their buyers? How do they talk to the buying needs? What information do they need? I mean, this is what are the buyers, information the buyers need. So these are things that sometimes for particularly for startups, there was an idea that met a need, but then you hit a point where it's like, okay, we need to get beyond the initial buyers of our product and service, and we need to have a more structured approach to this. And that's exactly what startups typically don't have. It's a structured approach to anything. And so therefore, helping them with that is going to be really important.
Yeah, and I think that's really, I like that as well, because like you say, a startup, they'll have their friends and family. And if you think about the, there's that bell curve, isn't there? An upside down bell curve where you've got the early adopters at the early stage, and you're going to make a certain amount of revenue from those folks. And then you've got to cross the chasm and make it into the mainstream. I think that's the point you're making, right? Is that understanding how you do that for your clients, right? So,
I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's like you can even go from the perspective of having one or two, I don't know, let's say a half dozen clients that help fund the business, but you haven't figured out how to even get more early adopters. So yes, there's scaling through the early adopter phase. There's the early majority phase, which is typically the chasm to cross. And beyond. So, and
then there's the mainstream. So, in your example, which seems like a very real example, what are the high-level goals and needs of your ICP, Jeff?
I think the helping a company grow organically and build a marketing function, that can scale into the future, and perhaps beyond the need to have me. One of the things that I've been trying to help some MSPs with is like, well, how do you build this function? And then you get to a point where it's like you can hire the full-time marketing person, and then you may need me after that or not, or they can just kind of take over. And so I think that's kind of the niche within the niche. But and obviously I could do other things, but it's like that's kind of the foot you want to put forward first.
And I also think the need there, I guess, is they've moved beyond that friends or family, and they actually need to do marketing now. They need to find some strangers to sell their stuff to, right? Which is the business need there. And also, I'm going to point to our the thing that we've got on the whiteboard over here in our fictitious workshop, which is the rabbit hole of defining the offer, right? Which is, I think also when you start to go into this, you really do start to look at the offer, don't you? As well as how does that fit this need? All right. So we've got the industry, we've got a bit about the company and those firmographics, and we're into the meat of the needs. The next question that we ask when we define the ICP, we're on number 4. How do they solve the problem today? So I have to give you credit for this joke, because in our world of B2B tech, we're willing to bet that it involves a spreadsheet, right? Have you seen that MarTech, that cartoon MarTech stack? And it's basically got all this fancy stuff, and at the bottom there's like a spreadsheet, and it's like building blocks. And if you pull away the spreadsheet, the whole thing's going to fall down.
Apart.
So I think you're absolutely right. So so that's the next question to ask for our ICP. How do they solve the problem today?
Yes, and so I think that in my case, I want to find companies that have reached a point where they either can't get off the ground and or they can't grow without marketing. So they're at an inflection point, and perhaps they're starting from ground zero. Perhaps they they had somebody build a website. People work in consulting. Maybe they work with some agencies. Maybe they have like a junior marketing person who helps get emails out and post stuff on the website or something like that. But they just can't they can't move beyond that. And to the point about the spreadsheets, there are many spreadsheets involved here because you're in trying to impose a structure or process where there is none. So, we talked about helping them understand their needs. So it needs assessment worksheet, opportunity tracking. What do those processes look like? How do you score them? RACI models of who's doing what, So yes, there's lots that we need to build in here to, because they haven't been able to, in many cases, they haven't been solving the problem, or they've been solving it with the minimal pieces that are required to basically say we're a company. It's like you get the URL, you get the website, you did a couple events, you post some press releases. I think we're official. Okay. Now what do we do next?
Yeah. Build it and they will come. Unfortunately, no, they don't.
Yeah.
But I do think that how do they solve the problem today? I think it's nice that we've got this example of a clean tech consultancy and how they solve that problem today. But I also think that this is so pertinent to B2B tech when you're going into market, because there's the one big reason why somebody will not move ahead with your solution is going to be do nothing or continue to do what they do today, right? So you need to understand that how they solve the problem today, you've got a significant gap above that. Do you know what I mean? In terms of pain or value or something like that. Because if they're already solving the problem today and you can look at it and go, well, that's not optimal, but they don't agree with you, or there isn't enough pain or money in it for them to change, they're not going to change, are they? So, which also brings me on to the next sort of sub question in that particular stage. This is
4B for those who are following.
Yeah, for those that are following along at home, it's not really a step in itself, but there is an elephant in the room, I think, when we're looking at our ICPs. And actually, I think this is really important when you do your persona work as well, because it might vary in the buying group, but what is their relationship with change? And like I said, we're often competing with do nothing. So what do you think of that?
Well, I think, we may neglect in creating our RCPs is that that most new products or services require a commitment to change. I mean, other than, buying stationery and computers for the staff and stuff like that, most other investments are going to require the fact that we understand we need to change. And, as marketers, we're trying to inspire that change and build trust that they can make that change with us. So we need to understand if in this ICP is open to change, and change happens in this kind of business. And that, frankly, it's like usually if you get a conversation with somebody, you're doing your business development work and you get a conversation with somebody, that is likely, this is the typical profile of the champion within a buying model, is that they're the one that says, I know we need to do something different here. That's how I got into my last couple set of clients, is like there was somebody there who's like, I know we need to do something different. I'm going to go talk to the CEO, or maybe it is the CEO. And so we're going to say, let's make this investment to help us change, to get to that next level, not to be too cliche about that.
Well, I absolutely agree with that, because I think that, and maybe this might sound a little bit nuts, to me, we always talk project sponsor and we always talk about, our champion, but actually they're the agent of change inside that business, aren't they? And I think that we need to recognize the challenge ahead of them from doing that, right? It isn't just about us selling them on our features and functions. It's how do they bring change into their organization that we can draft behind almost, isn't it? So when it comes to this fictional business, I've got my little quotes going up. What's their relationship with change?
Well, it's
or their feelings about change.
Their feeling about change. It is that they have a desire to get to that, and I guess I went ahead of myself in my notes to get to that next level. So change is kind of implicit, and I mean, companies making investments in advisory services or consulting, usually they are focused on driving change. In my experience at Serious Decisions and Forrester was that, people would sign up with us because it's like, we need to apply best practices. We need to do things differently. We're on a growth trajectory, or we're something needs to be fixed. And so it's a matter of matching, my change skills to their change needs.
Okay. Yes. Well, when you get ahead of the notes, then, I'm on.
Stop.
There's also external factors as well. So it's not just the change that's being driven internally, but there might also be change that's happening to the organization. So when we developed this ICP, and I think we've actually touched on this, is it's not just their relation with change as a champion of change or an agent of change, but also how are they going to deal with change that's actually affecting this organization? Do they recognize the change and stuff like that, isn't it? So there's that other interpretation of the word change.
Yeah, and this is almost a further winnowing down, as we were kind of stepping through the identifying the businesses in terms of we picked a market sector, we picked a company size, business. We've, now we may be saying, there are places, there are submarkets where there are external forces that are having an impact in this market, and they may be opportunities, they may be threats or whatever. It is, when I think about electrifying transportation, I realize it's like, and I've been dealing with companies from a more of a global perspective, but I realize that, in every country, the government incentives are different. The availability of both the product, the EVs, or the charging infrastructure, or the lack thereof is different. And it's funny because I remember as I was working on this, I was remembering a quote from somebody, I can't remember who it was, but it was a webinar with EV Box, one of the charging infrastructure suppliers. And the guy said, you can't have the charging infrastructure go too far ahead of the adoption of the vehicles, or vice versa, because then people get, they get dissatisfied. So there's this dissonance in the market, which I think certainly is the case in the U.S., where, there's like dozens and dozens of EV models you could buy, and yet there's not a significant charging infrastructure yet. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so these are things where it's like you need to look for, well, where are there things that maybe you can help people get through a transition in the market, or you can actually just look for where everything seems to be in place for rapid acceleration. And so you're trying to help small companies take advantage of that. Or you could look where, I don't know, things are going south and say, okay, I'm going to avoid that for a while. So it is, I think, a part of one, understanding situations that your companies may be in, and then the further narrowing of the niche you're going after.
Yeah, and the changes that are affecting their industry. And I think, I perhaps should have written EVs as a rabbit hole on our rabbit hole list, because I could also go down that rabbit hole with my client, because you're absolutely right, particularly in the US, right? But I think the general message there is what changes, and the other thing with the EV mod as a business, it's an interesting one, because you've got demand, supply, and you've also got regulation affecting that market, right? So, and I think that often in where we've worked previously with B2B tech or B2B marketing tech, regulation doesn't really play much of a role apart from GDPR or a big shift like that, right? So, I think it is important to have your little periscope up to what's happening in this market, not just competitors and that kind of stuff, but is there regulatory change? Is there social change? What else is happening? So I think that's an important point. So we move on to the fifth. So we've done 4 steps. We've defined the industry, we've defined the company profile. We dove into their needs. Sorry,
I changed the tense on you. Sorry.
We dove into their needs and how they solve the problem today. Now the rubber is hitting the road. How do they buy our products or service? And I think this is interesting that we've got this as our fifth step, because I think this is often forgotten. When you're defining an ICP with a client, they just assume that, you build it, they will come, they're going to see the value. But you do need to think about how they're going to buy the product or service, right? So the thing there is who the buyer is, who influences the decision, who are the people around the buyer that are influencing the decision, external to the company, the gatekeepers, the budget holders, who can say yes, who can say no. And so what else do we need to consider there?
Well, this is creating your buyer, your sort of map.
We're into personas a little bit here, aren't we?
We are a little bit into personas. We're also, because frankly, I mean, so in the case of, my ICP I'm drafting up here is that the champion is likely going to be the owner of a business or the head of sales. Because the head of sales is looking for a marketing partner, or the owner is looking for establishing a marketing function. So that's kind of a single decision maker buying process. It could be a consensus where so what's the influence of the board or the executive team that's currently in there, or is there another key executive who is going to weigh in? So it's the head of sales, maybe it's the head of services, or somebody who's got an interest in marketing. And so you're looking at a consensus and who are all, you need to be able to identify all these players. I think it's in the ICP, it's kind of safe to start with who's going to be identifying who we think the champion is going to be, but then being able to, as we're doing our business develop, to understand who else is involved. Are there recruiters because they're in a search process, and I think typically at the small side, it's not a big committee buy. It's likely going to be an individual with a few other people who are making a decision.
But to genericize this for the purposes of the podcast, but not the purposes of our little workshop here, is when we're thinking about how will they buy at this stage, when we're thinking about the ICP, we're just broadly kind of drawing out that process and who's likely to be in that process. We're not thinking too deeply about those individuals at this point. We're just thinking, well, it's let's not use your example. Let's say it's a MarTech solution. So we believe there's going to be a senior marketing person involved. There's going to be a marketing ops person. There's going to be a technical person. It's probably out of a central budget, blah, blah. We can just kind of sketch that out in a fairly loose way, can't we? But we understand how they will buy, and we get an understanding of who our champion's going to be, right? In that. So for your ICP, how will they buy, Jeff?
Yeah, I think it is going to be, it's going to be a head of sales or owner who is going to be the point of introduction. And then, as I said, it can be prepared that other people may enter into that buying decision, but likely it's one of those two people who are going to be that you're looking for, and that are going to make the final decision, and the people you need to have in the conversation. Because again, we're as we go back up to the the business goals and the needs, there's a strategic need to fill, and then there's also kind of a marketing execution need to fill. They're going to be the people that are interested in that.
So those are our 5 steps, and hopefully your example there. I know it's a bit of a tricky one to follow along because you're both conducting the workshop alongside me and being the receiver of the workshop. But I think we can.
Yes, I was like, as I said in an email, I think I'm wondering how much I should charge myself for this work.
So number 1, the first step, we're going to understand the target industry and category. Number 2, we're going to dive into the firmographics, so company size and revenue and what our target is going to be. And that'll sort of figure out, whether they're able to buy the service or solution that we're offering. And number 3 is the business goals and needs, to start to dive into the high level business and goals and needs that they have. And number 4, how do they solve the problem today, to understand whether they're actually going to be, there's enough friction for them to actually choose your solution or stick to do nothing, which is our biggest competitor in B2B. And number 4 was, so number 4, I skipped one of them. No, that wasn't.
I think you're on to number 5.
And number 5, yes. How will they buy our products or services? So that's perfect. Thank you very much, Jeff. And I hope that the example that we gave there sort of brought that a little bit to life. But we've also, we've got that, haven't we, captured in the blog post already. So I'll share that in the show notes. And then it draws us to our last agenda item, which I don't think anybody ever does in a workshop, but probably should. What's our song for the day?
Really? That is a great idea. Playing out or playing. I attend a lot of Zoom calls where people like start with a song or something like that, and so or end with. And so
in a band. Is it? I will.
Yeah. Anyway, we settled on "Be the One" by Dua Lipa in 2015. I could be the one. I mean, I think that's the aspiration you're having for yourself. I could be, for my ideal customer profile, I could be the one. I probably can't sing it as well as Dua Lipa, but there you go.
You can give it a go. And anyway, that's not what, your ICP aren't people that can, that would be replaced by Dua Lipa. That are looking for a Dua Lipa. They're looking for a Jeff Clark. Right. All right. So
that's true.
I don't know where that was going, but I should play that with "Be the One" by Dua Lipa in 2015. And most importantly, for me, Jeff, are you going to be in the studio next week?
Yes, let's work on the schedule once we
we have
turn the mics off
this week. Yeah, we haven't got to touch it next week, but we will have. So I'll see you then, mate. And have a good one. Have a good week. Bye, buddy. Bye, bye.
Thank you, Jeff. That was, of course, a little snippet of Dua Lipa and "Be the One." And if you have a clean tech business in transportation, it sounds like you'll be the one for Jeff. In all seriousness, Jeff is very active in this space. Well worth a chat if you are in clean tech. Right, it's that time of the week to retire to the Rockstar CMO virtual bar for a cocktail and a chat with the chief troublemaker at the Content Advisory, Robert Rose. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Hello, my friend. Welcome to the bar. It is the last, here in the U.S. anyway, it is the last sort of unofficial weekend of summer.
Yes.
And so we're celebrating the end of summer, beginning of fall. And I know it's not, we're Americans, right? We're stupid that way. But, Labor Day weekend, which is the long weekend we are about to embark upon, or we are in the middle of, is here. And so it's a great way to sort of, celebrate all things summer, but also get ready for, the end of the year, sort of the sprint toward the end of the year. And so as such, it's a perfect weekend for a pitcher full of sangria. And that's what we're going to have tonight. So I have a special sangria, and I have my recipe for sangria that I really like. And of course, people who don't know sangria, it's basically Spanish wine punch, right? And so it's great for a hot weekend where you want to drink something refreshing, but you also sort of, it's that it feels transitory, right? It feels like you're in the middle of transitioning to sunset or something like that. And anyway, so it starts very, very simple. It's basically red wine. I prefer a good Spanish red wine just to keep it classic, Tempranillo or a Grenache, something like that. And so you start with that, of course. Then fresh fruit. Always fresh fruit, no sugars here. So fresh fruit, oranges, apples, lemons. That's most common, obviously taste, if you want some raspberry in there, you want some lime instead of lemon, whatever you like, basically. But the key is slice it thin so that it can infuse with your wine. And then I add a little Grand Marnier liquor to it. That would in basically in lieu of some sugar or anything like that, add a little Grand Marnier, or you can add triple sec if you want to, but I prefer if I'm going to have my sugar, I'm going to have it with alcohol associated with it.
Absolutely.
You can also use Cointreau if you prefer, but Grand Marnier is my addition. Add to taste, basically. How much? Add to taste. And so we're making a pitcher here, remember. And then lastly, some orange juice, right? Some fresh squeezed orange juice. And No brown sugar, no maple syrup, nothing like that. Just a little orange juice, and you're going to be good to go. Now, here's the secret to it all, and it's ready for us to drink right now. But the secret is you want to chill this thing for some time, right? So stick it in the fridge and let it sit in the pitcher for a bit of time, and because that gives the chances for the wine to really infuse into the fruit, and vice versa. And then you pour all of it, fruit, wine, the whole bit, into some glasses. Because it's so chilled, you really don't need ice. If you want ice, fine, but I wouldn't put it on ice. And then basically you're ready to go and have a whole pitcher of these things. And we'll kick off Labor Day weekend the right way.
Nice. And I think, as I've mentioned previously, we often holiday in Spain, so sangria is there. And I think that a brandy element, the liquor element varies depending
that's right.
on what you want to stick in there. I like the idea of the Contra. I think that would go nice with the fruit. I think that'd be lovely. So
it's really whatever your taste. Yeah, whatever your taste buds is. Sometimes people throw cinnamon sticks in there. I don't like that.
No.
I don't think the cinnamon matches well with the red wine, but that's it's completely up to you.
Yeah, well, it's like any of these things. Some people go real fancy, and then other people just toss some cheap red wine in with some fruit and some liquor, and off they go.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. So that's the whole point about it.
Where are we drinking these? Yeah, where are we drinking these?
Oh, well, we're going to go to Spain, right? We have to go to Spain for this.
Yeah.
Yes, and we have to be on the coast because that's just a requisite. So I'm thinking somewhere in one of those small little villas along the coast. In Spain, pick any one. Really, they're all amazing. Sitting on a cliffside somewhere, looking out at the water, and watching maybe the sunset as we drink some sangria.
And I think that this time of year is excellent as well because it's not too hot. A bit like, is it cooling down in California now? As you come to
it's
the end
not. This is our hot time of year. Yeah,
okay.
It will start to cool as we get into the latter part of September and maybe into October. But sometimes we get that what we call an Indian summer, where you've got the sort of late heat. September is usually the worst month for heat for us here. So
cool. Yes. Well, I mean, it's not cool. It's too hot. So you've got a few more weeks before you get out and about again. And so we're chilling out in Spain. The weather is perfect. And the conversation turns to marketing, as it often does with us. What's the topic this week, Roberts?
Well, we're going to talk about a little bit, something that's been top of mind, especially given our conversations over the last couple of weeks, talking about signal and noise. I think we can all agree that right now it's really noisy right now. And trying to get your message, whether it's content marketing, whether it's your sales message, whether it's your marketing message, is just hard. It's just really, really difficult right now. And, we've all leaned into the latter part of this year. We've all leaned into starting to design content, like we talked about I think it was last week or the week before, designing content for all the different platforms, right? So designing little mini moments really in all of these different platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's X or whether it's Facebook or Instagram or your website or your email newsletter or whatever. It's trying to design these moments for people that can really drive value and create interest enough for them to want to explore more. And that's not necessarily a new concept, but it's become more prevalent on other platforms other than ourselves. And the idea here is that there is a lot of quantity of content. Now, it doesn't at a certain level, it stops making anything more difficult, right? Because, and arguably we reached that point years and years and years ago. But even today, now with AI, I was working with a company and they phoned me up and we were talking about their goals, and they were trying to use AI to ramp up their, they were going to go from 500 articles every week, from 5 articles every week to 500 articles every week. No. So 30,000 posts per year. And they're going to use AI to do that.
Oh, for God's sakes.
So you can debate whether that's wise or not, or just.
I don't think there's much of a debate, mate. I don't think there's much of a debate.
but they're going to do it, And so it doesn't matter, right? Because it's one of those things where they're going in, and you can hate gravity, but gravity doesn't care, right?
Yeah,
So what do
yeah.
you do in a world where companies feel like it's smart to put out 30,000 posts in a year? And so you start to think about it, and you say, okay, really, when we think about this democratization of content, right, it's not our ideas that have become democratized. And in fact, good ideas are probably scarcer than ever.
Yeah.
It is like the photocopier, the word processor, the camera, the printing press, everything, all the technologies. It's the production and distribution of content that has become more democratized. And so you've got ideas that are differentiating ideas that will ultimately create more value to your consumers, to your whoever your constituents are. You've got these great differentiating ideas. Let's be honest, they're scarcer than ever. So you don't have 30,000 good ideas every year. You have a few good ideas every year, but you also have to pierce the noise, because those big differentiating ideas are going to be so different that no one's searching for them, and that you're going to be hard pressed to get them to surface in a bubble above the fray. So you, by design, you have to create a balance of being really noisy and creating enough noise that people are interested enough to find your signal, right?
Yeah.
That's the real design here. And so we can learn some lessons from media companies who treat their ideas, their differentiating ideas, as precious sort of items, right? They're not just things to package up and add to the baggage of the 30,000 posts every year. Their precious ideas are precious, and they treat them as such. And then basically they reuse them and reuse them and reuse them, because they are good differentiating ideas.
Yeah.
In other words, they don't spend their time trying to figure out how to package up 1,000 bad ideas or 1,000 good ideas. They spend their time trying to figure out how to wrap up a few good ideas in as many packages as they possibly can.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting shift for most marketing teams, where if we didn't produce it last quarter, it's too old, right? Or if we did produce it last quarter, it's too old. Or if we did something last month, it's probably not relevant anymore, and all those kinds of things. And it's a shift in the way that we create content for the long run to say, we're going to spend more time coming up with a few really good differentiating ideas, and spend less time about how we're actually going to create a million different things. But we're going to take those few ideas and package them up in all kinds of different ways, so that we can actually try and bubble up to the surface, so that we can get somebody to care enough to want to explore deeper and come read the book or the ebook or listen to the hour-long video or whatever it happens to be. And I think that's just a subtle shift in our content creation process that's super important these days.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, I mean, I'm just marveling at this idea of doing this ramp up to using AI. I think the level of effort to get 5,000 good posts from ChatGPT or something is going to be fairly significant on its own anyway, right? So why not be a little more focused around 5 good ideas, and absolutely repurpose them and stuff. But what would ChatGPT do if you gave it one topic and said, give me 5,000 articles on this? They're going to be incredibly repetitive, aren't they? I mean, it just isn't.
It'll do it, right? I mean, it can do it and will do it. And that's the thing. It's like we've gotten to this point where it's like it can and will. And so because it generally makes sense, right? The articles make sense, and why wouldn't they? It's not differentiating content. It's the most average or the most probable content that gets generated. So generating ad nauseum versions of one particular idea becomes that's what AI is good at, right? I mean, is finding the multiples, infinite iterations of one question. And usually that question
is not very insightful. And the thing is, where AI struggles is when you give it a differentiating idea and ask it to actually produce something. Absolutely. It's usually producing something based on what it knows, which is going to reduce your great idea into something average.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because it just doesn't know. It doesn't have, if it's such a differentiating idea, it doesn't understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And wasn't it, well, there's a couple of things there. One is I think that somebody needs to bring out a generative AI platform called Ad Nauseam. I think that'd be perfect. And then the other one is at the beginning of this whole AI hype, there were a number of people that were saying that they put their idea into something like ChatGPT. And if the blog, and then what came back was the blog post they didn't want to write, right? They oh, well, so that's the line for what's boring and generic. I need to not do that, which I think was an interesting approach back in. I know that in the space of a year or whatever since this all started, the algorithms got a hell of a lot better, and actually ChatGPT is producing a lot better content than it did at the beginning. But I still think there's some truth in that, right? Is that if you put your idea into ChatGPT and it comes out with something, that's the boring shit that you shouldn't be writing about. Everybody else is already doing it. Yeah,
really, truly.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because guess what? Yeah. Somebody else is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you have to figure if you're seeing it if you see it in ChatGPT, then that means it already exists.
Yeah. Absolutely.
In some different form.
Yeah.
And so, the iteration might be different. It might use different words like synergize and delve and all those things that ChatGPT likes to use. Big flowery words, and overly formal and overly robust with sort of the different adjectives and adverbs. And ChatGPT never met an adverb it didn't like, and so it's like if it renders, then it's like, okay, that's it's somewhere out there. It already exists.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is a great point. I'm very, very curious about this company that may have gone from 5 posts to 5,000 posts, and that to me sounds horrendous. And so I'm very curious about that. But if somebody were to look for 5 great posts that were very carefully put together, like a great publisher, where might they find those, Robert?
Well, they might find it at our little website called contentadvisory.net. That's where we put our precious few ideas. We have precious few of them, let me tell you.
And when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where are they going to find you?
LinkedIn primarily. Yeah, I would love to connect on LinkedIn. It's where I do all my hashtag social media stuff, with the exception of I'm a lurker on Threads for the most part, and really enjoy the content there.
Nice. All right, mate. Well, and most importantly for me, will you be in the bar next week?
Well, I suspect I will, yeah.
I look forward to it. I'll see you then. Cheers. Thank you, Robert. We chatted a bit after I stopped recording about that company that are aiming to use AI to create 5,000 posts a month, as I was astonished. And I suspect it's not a winning strategy for their audience. But I think that's an interesting point there. And one of the ones we didn't explore is that in this example, generative AI is being used to do more, not to replace the existing activity or people, which is the thing we've always been talking about that Gen AI would be doing. But still, 5,000 posts a month? So that's a wrap on episode 232 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. You can find links to me, Jeff and Robert, along with all the things we discussed in the show notes on rockstarcmo.com, along with our blog, newsletter, and all of our previous episodes. Next week, Jeff and I will be back in the studio to discuss marketing a company in realignment. And as you heard, Robert will be back in the bar. In the meantime, have a great week. I hope you can join me next week here on Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.